Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Stock Market Today for Tuesday, June 17th. It's Alissa Coram here, and stocks falling today amid concerns of the increasing tensions in the Mideast. And joining me now to discuss the action in today's session is my colleague, Ed Carson. Ed, what are the stocks we're going to be highlighting today?
I want to take a look at Cisco, Astera Labs, and Viking Holdings.
All right, we will spotlight those stocks. But first, let's take a closer look at the major indexes down on the day, as mentioned. The NASDAQ down 0.9%. Same for the Russell 2000, headed for a decline of about 0.9% into the final stretch of the day. Meanwhile, the S&P 500 down 0.8% or so, and the Dow closed down 0.7%. So, Ed, we are seeing a little bit of weakness here, but let's take that step back. Where are we in this market?
Yeah, I mean, the Dow went below the 200-day line, but otherwise, the S&P and NASDAQ still look solid, still above their 21-day lines. I mean, they're pausing over the last few days, but more broadly, there's an uptrend still very much in place. I mean, there's news that, the speculation is the U.S. could join the like the attack on Iran. Who knows if that's true, but just the fact that, the market's just taking it all in stride. Let's just be honest. It's like, this is not that much action. Now, maybe if something actually happens or doesn't happen, the market will make a big move. We've
Right.
got the Fed tomorrow. There's a lot that could happen. So the market could suddenly decide, it all matters. Okay. It could all
Mhm.
matter. But right now, this was not a very big move, and the trend is still very much intact.
Right. So I think that's very key to remember what you pointed out. We do need to be flexible here. And one way to sort of filter out the noise out there is looking at the impact of the headlines on the broad market action. So, what would disrupt this strong market trend that we've been seeing? You said it, Ed, that 21-day line. That's the green line on the chart here for the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ. So for the S&P, we're 0.8% above that level. So, we were down 0.8% today. So it wouldn't take much to come down and touch or test that level or even rebound, which in a power trend, which we are in, Ed, rebounds off of the 21-day line. I mean, we had one a couple of weeks ago that offered an opportunity to add exposure. So that would be sort of the optimistic scenario that could unfold. Meanwhile, the Nasdaq here, it's 1.4% above the 21-day line. So if we do get a test, I think that'll be key to see where do we close? What's the closing range? Are we going to get support and bounce, or would we see continued weakness? So that would be something to watch out for as these various headlines, whether it's the Mideast tensions or like you said, the Fed tomorrow. We'll just have to see how that all shakes out in the market.
Yeah, just one more point is that if we went underneath the 21-day line, we'd be sort of probably undercutting or testing the lows from a couple weeks ago, and then that late May range. So there's a lot of key levels. So that'd also be a place where you really would expect and want it to find support. Again, we could drop underneath it a little bit and bounce back. But
Mhm.
yeah, so this is a key area, but the market so far is acting well. So far, the market is acting well.
It has. And because you mentioned the Fed, Ed, any thoughts on what kind of messaging we might get?
Yeah, I mean, there's speculation that the Fed will scale back how many rate cuts it's looking at, even though some of the economic data, there's just so much uncertainty that not just the Trump tariffs being in flux, but the current oil, situation prices with the Mideast. So we'll have to see. And, the market may not like that, but the market may not be a shock either how that goes. Oil prices have really risen a lot. That's definitely something that happened today. So yeah, and the problem is that then we have Thursday as a market holiday, so we won't get
Mm,
much of a, if we have a day two reaction, well, the world may have a day two reaction, but we won't really have it in the US until Friday, which may be a low volume day as well. So a little interesting. We'll see if the Fed meeting gets overshadowed by other events. But
mhm.
yeah, we'll just have to take it by day. The 10-year Treasury yield has been pulling back. The economic data has been weaker. I do think that if it weren't for a lot of the backdrop of uncertainty, the economic data would suggest rate cuts. Maybe not
Mm.
right now, but pretty soon. But there is a lot of uncertainty, and the Fed's wary of that.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ed. Let's move on. Next, let's take a look at a couple of ETFs. Here's RSP. So this is the equal weighted S&P 500 ETF, down 1% on the day. So definitely a bit of a bigger decline than the S&P 500's 0.8% or so drop, but we are still holding some key levels here.
Yeah, and I will.
Holding, arguably testing.
Yeah, sort of testing and like and this is sort of taking out the mega caps to a certain extent, but oil and some of the commodities were doing well. So outside of those areas, other parts of the economy there were some pretty big losses. But yeah, little key area here. You'd really like to see RSP hold the 200-day line.
Next on our list, let's take a look at the VIX, Ed. What is the VIX showing us? A little bit of an uptick, but nowhere near sky high fear levels.
Nowhere near, nowhere near. I mean, it's not even, very short-term highs, let alone the highs, from like the peak of the Trump tariff concerns when they really peaked and the market bottomed. Yeah, so, on the one hand, the market's taking everything on stride, on the other hand, it's like they could get a lot more scared. If things happened, then things could happen with the market, but we're not seeing that yet.
Okay. And let's take a look at gold, check in on GLD. Full disclosure, I do have a position here. I'm just going to remove that index line so we can see the action here. It looks like we're seeing a continuation of this trend higher, not only from early in May, but really the entire year here, Ed, for gold.
Yeah, it's been great. There's just been a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of things just people, let's go into gold. I mean, the US dollar's been weak all year. So that's been a big factor for gold's rise. I mean, so that's continuing. Even though the dollar rose today, it's still there. And it is interesting because gold's clearly been a hedge when Bitcoin
Mhm.
has not been. I think that's the other thing is that gold has been there. Bitcoin has been doing well, but it's been acting more like a speculative growth stock, and it always has had more of that character. There's other things. There's the stable coin stuff, which you can maybe there's that. And one thing that may have propped up the Bitcoin recently was the House bill had this remittance tax, and it's still in the Senate draft bill, but there's some easing rules. So maybe, I mean, I'm just trying to imagine why Bitcoin was down so much today because it was down a lot more than the indexes. But this is still in that little pattern. It's still doing fine. Maybe it just forms a little base on base or a high handle. It did come off lows.
Yeah, down 3.7% on the day. Full disclosure, I do own it. It's holding above the lows from 6.5 in this narrow trading range, as you mentioned. So ideally, we just see it continue to move sideways here. Let that 50-day or 10-week line catch up. Perhaps that could be an opportunity for traders to add to existing positions or initiate if they did want some exposure here. But you're right, it's so interesting to see what can influence the price action here for this space. All right, and then you mentioned oil, so let's take a quick look at XLE continuing to move. You can see a sharp increase in that relative strength line. We do know that this has heavy weightings in Chevron and Exxon, but there's widespread interest, I would say, and notable action in the energy sector with oil, again, as you mentioned, sharply turning higher.
Yeah, and you're seeing some of the drilling and services firms pick up because that is really more volatile because the demand just completely dries up when prices were getting pretty low. So there should be a lot more demand for that. But yeah, definitely on the radar here again for the first time in a while.
Yeah, I guess the risk here is, Ed, just like with anything that comes into focus in a hypersensitive, news-driven moment, is that there's always the chance that you could see a reversal of that trend on some headlines,
I
depending on what happens. Or do you think that that's a factor at all?
I think it's absolutely a factor. I definitely would not be somebody who's all oil or all gold or all Bitcoin or almost all anything. That's
Yeah.
never a good idea, but especially in a situation where literally things could fall or rise 4 or 5%. The stocks might rise and oil tumbles. So yeah, you just don't know how things will go. But just keep that in mind. I think
Yeah.
one thing definitely is how much exposure you have to various areas because different parts of the market will react very differently
Mhm.
with the news that'll be coming on the next few days.
Yeah, great point, Ed. Okay, let's take a look at some stocks, starting with Cisco. This was the IBD stock of the day today in the computer networking group. It's working on a cup with handle, flirting with a breakout, you might say, Ed.
Yeah, it got above there intraday, trying to get back above the buy point. Came back down, but not too badly given the
Yeah.
market. Growth has been slowly picking up. I mean, it's a little bit like some of these old dogs that are sort of like coming back, Oracle, IBM, a few of those names that are slowly turning around. Cisco's joining that. Yeah, that relative strength line has picked up over the last year. And if you really look on a monthly basis, that relative strength line, I mean, there were little periods when it rose, but generally for 20 years, it's been trending lower or going sideways. So it's sort of nice to see that uptick again. I mean, there's a lot of AI revenue. That growth is accelerated. It's still a small part of it. They have a fair amount of cybersecurity stuff in their business. So there are parts of their business that are doing pretty well right now. It can't, it's starting to move the needle a little bit, and that's sort of that hard because it's so big still, even with not growing a whole lot in recent years. But definitely one to consider. This is probably not going to be something that goes on an enormous tear, but it's definitely something that investors consider. It's like,
Mhm.
that maybe this really a turn. That's a heck of a consolidation. That's just from there, and it's still got the 2020. It's still 2000. It still has the all-time highs from there
Mhm.
to get above. But probably some people have already gotten out. But this is probably the consolidation really to look at here.
Yeah. Interesting action as of late and great points there, Ed, as we're seeing renewed interest in the AI theme and some of these uh, the old guard coming back into focus and joining the party there. Okay, let's take a look at A-Lab. Also an AI stock, but a very different one. This is in the same group as NVIDIA, and Astera Labs went public in the spring of 2024. It's what been on a roller coaster ride, right, Ed? What a roller coaster for this stock. It seems to have calmed down a little bit, and it's forming a base at a key area here, a round number.
Yeah, it sort of works as like a too low handle. Maybe it can develop into a base or some kind of tight pattern. That 100 level is important, not only just because it's a round number and it's around where the resistance is. That's when Astera first came public, that's sort of almost peaked just below that. And so it's just like there's that brief period. This does go on long uptrends and long downtrends, even though and and even when so it goes in favor and out of favor. Right now it seems to be back, and there seems to be a lot of these other AI plays that are still coming up, and there is still overhead resistance. Strong numbers for a couple more quarters, then maybe the growth slows on the earnings side. That's just something to note. I think there's at some point the law of big numbers starts coming to play.
Mhm.
But this is definitely one. One of the only negatives is that too many people are looking at it. I have not picked up, but it's like it seems like it almost feels like too many people are excited about it. That of growth investors, but I do think getting above these levels or even the levels from a day or two ago could provide an entry. Again, if things go bad, this is a stock that could go down very fast, but that goes to say with almost all the growth stocks.
Right. I think that's the biggest knock against this one is just how far it fell from its peak, Ed. I mean, over 140 down to below 50. That is quite the decline.
Yeah,
But on the flip side, it's had quite the comeback. And it does have that triple digit growth going for it, not only on the bottom line, but the top line as well, sort of reminiscent of Nvidia to an extent, just in percentage terms at least, showing that triple
sure.
digit growth on the top and bottom lines when it made its big move. So yeah, let's see if Astera can show us a little bit more out of this consolidation. We'll have to see. And next on the list, we'll switch gears here. We'll go to the travel sector and take a look at Viking in the leisure services group. The cruise line name is working on a base here, a handle area just shy of that 49 mark.
Yeah, I actually like the pullback it had because it had sort of crept up in low volume up the right side of that handle the first time. And, so it sort of was feeling almost extended even before it got up there. So
Right.
now it feels like it's came right down to the 21-day line, and given, that would have been fine action anyway. And the fact that it's doing it amid when the market is pausing, that's fine. Look, travel stocks under some pressure, higher oil prices, just concerns. People may not want to travel, or there's that fear that people want to travel. Again, if the Mideast conflict gets resolved, all that stuff goes away. So there's that. But this is definitely interesting. The only other note beyond the fact that this is looking good is that Carnival reports next week, and
Hmm.
that will be, I think, relevant for that. There's not too many reports out there, so that's also around a buy point. That's also would be one to look at for sure. But for Viking, probably just want to wait to see. Might want to wait to see, especially given all the other things going on. Let's see how the next week goes. But this one
Mhm.
shows a lot of strength, solid fundamentals, really strong earnings this year and should be strong next year as well. Um, so a lot to like about this name,
Mhm.
and cruise lines have been doing pretty well, in the last couple of years.
Yes, I especially like this annual earnings estimate, 872%, quite strong there. And to your point on the earnings coming up from Carnival, you do tend to see these stocks move together. I mean, we looked at both of these charts, Carnival and Viking. The chart patterns look quite similar here. So, maybe that wasn't quite as much the case, I think, when Viking first went public, it seemed like it was acting a little bit differently, but now it does seem like it's acting pretty similarly, at least to that one peer. We can check in on RCL. Perhaps it's made a little bit more progress off of the lows. It already broke out, and that pullback was more of a test of a buy point versus an attempt of a breakout, and then a new, maybe little mini handle shakeout area. But these are all looking pretty similar at this time. So we'll have
Yeah.
to keep an eye on those earnings from Carnival.
And I guess the commentary, I guess I really didn't think about this, but this will be, you know, the real trends, because they might say, well, people are really, no, people are still booking like crazy,
Mm.
or they might say, no, we really are seeing some caution. So because we don't probably, we probably are sort of in the dark, is that really having an impact on things? And so again, I think it may be extra important this time.
Okay. Well, thank you for that, Ed. We appreciate your take as always. Good chatting with you.
Thank you, Ali.
And thanks everyone for tuning in. That is it from us for today, but we will be back with more tomorrow morning on IBD Live, investors.com/IBD Live for all the details. We'll see you there. And then we'll also see you right back here tomorrow after the close.